We can understand many things about God, but this is not one of those things. And it makes sense that we, finite and created beings, could not fully understand our infinite creator God. In fact, it would be bizarre to suggest that we should be able to do so. The fact that the Old Testament was so thoroughly and uncompromisingly monotheistic helps explain why the Jews of Jesus' time found it so difficult to accept many of his statements. When Jesus called himself the Son of God, the Jews tried to kill him because he was making himself equal with God. John says this in his Gospel. This was why the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. In John 10, the Jews took up stones to stone Jesus when he said, "I and my Father are one." To such strict monotheists, Jesus' statements were blasphemous and worthy of death. But Jesus' claims to deity are not at all incompatible with monotheism. In fact, we can find hints pointing to a plurality within the being of God throughout the Old Testament. When God was creating man in Genesis 1, he said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." Genesis 1:26 can only refer to a plurality within the being of God. Man was made in the image of God and not in the image of angels. So this verse does not describe God's conversation with angelic beings. It refers to communication within the triune God. The Holy Spirit is spoken of in the Old Testament as distinct from God and yet one with God. In Genesis, it says that the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. The Holy Spirit is also shown to be personal in the Old Testament. He's not just an impersonal force or power. We see in the Psalms that the Spirit cares enough to lead us when the psalmist says, "Teach me to do your will, for you are my God. Let your good Spirit lead me on level ground." And Isaiah says the Holy Spirit experiences grief. But they rebelled and grieved his Holy Spirit. Therefore, he turned to be their enemy and himself fought against them. Isaiah 63:10. Also, the presence of the angel of the Lord in the Old Testament strongly suggests a plurality within the being of the one God, since the angel of the Lord is clearly shown to be the Lord himself on many occasions, the pre-incarnate Christ. We can clearly see a plurality within the being of God in the Old Testament. However, God did not reveal himself in openly triune terms until the New Testament. And there are many passages in the New Testament in which all three are present and involved. For example, in Matthew 28, Jesus commands the disciples, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit." When Jesus was baptized himself, we see all three members of the Trinity. Jesus was baptized by John in the Jordan, and when he came up out of the water, immediately he saw the heavens being torn open and the Spirit descending on him like a dove. And a voice came from heaven, "You are my beloved Son. With you I am well pleased." And Jesus says this in John's Gospel, But when the Helper comes, whom I will send to you from the Father, the Spirit of truth, who proceeds from the Father, he will bear witness about me. Paul told the Ephesians, "For this reason I bow my knee before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth is named, that according to the riches of his glory he may grant you to be strengthened with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith." And Peter says this in his first epistle, "According to the foreknowledge of God the Father, in the sanctification of the Spirit, for obedience to Jesus Christ and for sprinkling with his blood." In these and many other passages, all three are mentioned. The New Testament writers never attempt to explain this. Rather, they simply state it as a reality. We can understand many things about God, but this is not one of those things. And it makes sense that we, finite and created beings, could not fully understand our infinite creator God. In fact, it would be bizarre to suggest that we should be able to do so. We can choose to humbly believe that God is three and one simply because he says it is true. And then we will walk in the life-transforming reality of both truths. Because God is one, we turn from idolatry to focus our love and life on him. Because God is three, we experience his eternal fellowship as his body. Both are true, and both deeply transform our lives.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe to our channel for more teaching videos like this. For more information about LeaderSource, please visit our website, www.leadersource.org.